Hi there, and welcome to Decoded, a tech-based podcast where we break down complicated topics for you. My name is Kirsten.
My name is Lwazi Shamase, and let's get decoded.
Today we are with a guest, Gevano Dantu. He is the owner of ACC and a partner of Akreen.
Hi Kirsten, hi Lwazi. Thank you for welcoming me on your podcast.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Good to have you.
Great to have you.
So today's topic is blockchain, and what we're going to do is we're going to break this down into a two-part series. So part one, we're going to try and break down blockchain as easily as we can. This is quite a broad and complex topic, and cryptocurrency as well. So we're going to try our best to, in our 20-minute episodes, to break it down for you. So firstly, we want to get into essentially what it is, right? So when we talk about blockchain, I want you to think of it as block and chain. Let's break it down there. When we talk about a block, it's essentially a digital ledger that keeps track of transactions. And inside this digital ledger, once the block gets complete, this gets locked and nobody can add more transactions to it. So if we kind of compare this to something that already exists, you can think of it like a Google Doc where people can add in entries, but then no one else can change those entries or they can edit it at a later stage. It becomes permanent. And once that doc becomes full, then you create another block and you add it to the chain. Now, the context in which this usually operates is to do with transacting or to do with tracking certain things. So you can even use this within supply chain and in other areas as well. But we mainly see this as a basis for how crypto works. So pretty much what happens is your transaction happens, and then there's a process of verification. So if, for example, I want to send my friend Bill money, so what will happen is I will want to send him that money and it will go through the transfer process. So my block will have the record of that transaction, and now Bill's block will also have the record of that transaction. And then from there, what will happen is there will be a verification step. And once the entire transaction has been verified, then that block can be added to the chain and it can be non-editable. And the way that this is important is because it becomes permanent, nobody can come in there and edit that block. So that's essentially the basis of it. What are your thoughts, Lwazi?
No, definitely. And thank you, Kirsten, for that very in-detailed explanation on what it is. And you're right in saying that. Look, at the end of the day, blockchain does come with transparency. It comes with security. And if I'm transacting with you, and let me tell you something, folks, we're going into the why is it actually important. It's built on security, transparency, and trust. So if I'm giving you and I'm transacting you and saying what you made an example of, Gevano, I'm going to transact 100 Rand to you. And you can already see on both sides, the sender and the receiver, there's 100 Rand. I'm about to enter it into the blockchain now. And once it's been inserted into the blockchain, we can't do anything. There's no intermediate that's going to interfere with that. It's locked in stone and no one can edit it. And that's the great part about why it's actually important, because I'm building that trust. I'm telling you, I'm about to send you this data, which is in the blockchain, which is stored data. It's going to be sent into that ledger, and Gevano here is going to then receive the money as it is. No banking fees. And if they are, it'll be low, very low fees. And whatever we send, there's no intermediate. We're not going to have to wait 2 days for clearance. It'll be immediate. And that, again, we push into that next topic. But that gives us a high level of why it's actually important.
And I think also to just bring it back to why this all started is because in the beginning, a lot of people were getting upset with the fact that their money was always being tampered with government things. So for example, if your money is sitting in a bank, right, you don't necessarily know if the government is now tampering with it, or they may make regulation changes, and you actually don't have a lot of control over that.
Yes.
Also, if I am now paying for my meal at a restaurant and I'm going through a bank, that bank could go down, or there could be issues with the transfer going through. And that's why the blockchain was begun, is to essentially bring the power power back to the people, bring the ability to transact without going through a middleman the whole time. And this has been completely transformative in a lot of industries. And that's why we have our guest Gevano today to kind of go into that with us on maybe a little bit more detail of what we may not have covered. So Gevano, over to you. Tell us about blockchain and your thoughts.
Again, welcome.
Yeah, so there's quite a few real world examples of blockchain. So firstly, starting with supply chain. So it's used in supply chain, it pretty much tracks the whole vertical chain. So let's take De Beers, they use this with their diamonds.
Yeah.
So from the mining component to the logistics component to the selling component. So it ensures that everything is pretty much clean. There's no like inhumane human labor used or anything like that. Other example would be within healthcare. So healthcare pretty much records all your medical history, and this can be used right across any medical service that you require. So any hospital worldwide. Real estate, so the purchase of assets, property that's actually registered within your name, and it's publicly recorded. Voting and government transparency. So with like the US government elections for presidential, they actually use blockchain for that. Digital identity, which is quite a big thing. It's immutable identity and it's verifiable, and you can give it away without disclosing your personal information, but it's like a verified token. Music and entertainment. So artists like Selena Gomez is actually very famous for this, where she records all her albums on the blockchain and she sells that, and every secondary sale that takes place after that, she gets remunerated for that. Carbon credit and sustainability, obviously my speciality. So the tracking of companies' emissions, how they can buy these credits and offset their emissions against that for taxes. Automotive and vehicle tracking. So like BMW uses this for their services on their cars. So the whole service history of a car is recorded, and whenever you sell that car, it can be viewed. And then obviously finance and DeFi, decentralized finance. So we can transact, loan, and pretty much interact on a peer-to-peer basis without an intermediary, as you guys mentioned.
So I think also let's break down that decentralized concept as well, because I think that's the basis of the whole blockchain thing. And it's essentially where instead of having one single entity that's going to control everything, so you have your one big server usually, or you have your one big company that owns this entire bank and they own everything within there. The decentralized nature of blockchain is essentially that there's multiple different computers all connected within this network, and all of their processing power is used together in order to fuel this thing and give the actual power behind the blockchain. And that's why also when we talk about cryptocurrencies, when we move on to that, we'll also cover that it's not there's one blockchain, like you know how some people talk about there's one cloud and everything's in the cloud. It's that there are multiple different blockchains for multiple different use cases and multiple different types of cryptocurrency, and those cryptocurrencies will sit on a blockchain that is suitable for them. Do you want to add
on to that?
100%, yes. And to expand on that, you pretty much get private and you get public blockchains. So a lot of companies, like within the supply chain, for instance, that would be more a private blockchain. So it's pretty much only viewed within the stakeholders of this supply chain, where your public blockchains are more like something like a Bitcoin, where everyone can view the transactions, it's public, so it prevents fraud.
No, and what you mentioned over there of fraud, again, transparency is the key in blockchain. And since it's been revolutionary in the fourth industrial revolution, and now that we're heading into the fifth industrial revolution, the integration of AI could supercharge what blockchain already is in a more smart way. I mean, you mentioned earlier with BMW, with their service history, which is actually quite accurate, because if you go to private dealers, they can actually conduct fraud, saying, okay, we have a service history of the car, but they won't tell you it was in an accident. They won't tell you the detailed history of the car. And of course, they'll sell it at a markup price, which again, that's where we're talking to the fraud part. Now, of course, with integration with blockchain, you can already see that before even getting into the car to say, okay, am I happy with this car? Yes or no? And I'm happy, Gevano, that you actually mentioned that to us. And that's the importance of blockchain and how it's not, I would say it's not really just going to be applied to cryptocurrency, as we're going to dive into next, but in other applications that we've mentioned. And that's the key important. If I can trust you with the data I'm going to provide to you, that's a key, especially us going into this next revolution.
Yeah, but there's also a darker side to blockchain that a lot of people need to also realize is because of the nature of the way that the transactional data is sitting within these blocks, it's quite anonymous. And because there's all of these different types of algorithms that essentially hash the data and make it so that you can't always necessarily read the data or have access to the data. There are a lot of criminal groups that use the blockchain in order to transact and actually do fraud and things like that. So they will actually use it as a money laundering mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
So it's a big, big problem. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you want a tool to transfer money that isn't going to be regulated, then of course you're going to have these types of things that you need to think about. But also on that same topic, if you now have this like platform to transfer money and there isn't that middleman, now if anything goes wrong, there's also no one for you to go and
it's liable.
Yeah, there's no one that's liable. Like you can't actually get your money back. Like for example, if you have credit card fraud and someone gets access to your accounts, that you can actually go to your bank and you can say, listen, help me out with this, and they would refund you the money.
That's correct.
But if you are, you know, transacting using cryptocurrency on the blockchain, you don't necessarily have that opportunity to go and ask for help. So there's always like pros and there's cons
to it.
Yeah.
To everything actually.
There's definitely, yeah.
So to add to that, a way they overcome that is twofold. So firstly through validators or miners, and secondly through smart contracts, which is a key component to blockchain.
Okay. So
to start with smart contracts, it's pretty much a automated coded contract. So it automates, it executes upon a certain task. So for instance, I want to transfer Kirsten money. It validates my identity. It validates Kirsten's identity. And it also validates that the transaction is legit. And that's pretty much like smart contracts can be used within multiple use cases, as we've discussed on the different use cases of blockchain. And then the validators, they are pretty much the building blocks, the foundation of the blockchain. Okay. So you get different blockchains with different types of validators. So like Bitcoin, for instance, is proof of work. So it's like where there's massive forms of like GPUs, and it's just like mass processing power where they try to create like complex mathematical equations to solve a problem. But then you also get proof of stake, where people put up coins as collateral. So that's more like Ethereum. And the more collateral you put up, the more you'll have say in validating this thing. And then there's also like penalties for malicious validators. So this speaks to your point where if there's like any fraud or something that takes place, malicious validators get penalized. So some of their coins get taken away, or they actually get kicked out of the blockchain completely.
So just to add on to that, Gevano, so these validators, to actually add on to that and maybe dive into that, so are they part of the blockchain? Are they people that, I would say they're regulators within blockchain, or do you have to, how do you become a
can like anyone
validator?
Yeah. If you have the right hardware.
Right.
So they regard them as nodes. So you get like a super node and you get a light node. So
nodes. you can't call people nerds.
I'm probably one of them. But so going back to the nodes.
Yeah.
So pretty much you get your super nodes, which are your mass validators. So see them as kind of like auditors.
Oh, okay.
So they do form part of the blockchain itself. And then you also get your light nodes. So the super nodes store the whole blockchain ledger, where the light nodes only store part of the blockchain ledger. So that's where, like, speaking about the distributed nature of the blockchain, it's more your super nodes that are actually the validators.
So, but is that there a person behind that node?
Or is it
are you just talking about the hardware itself? So, like, for example, if I myself decide to build a massive, data center type of farm where I just put a bunch of extremely good hardware together to solve these complex problems, is that considered a node? And then it doesn't matter if it's like one person running it or multiple people running it.
100% yes. So with the nodes comes staking. So staking is where, going back to, so also just to take a step back, the nodes, you pretty much get different validators on different blockchain systems, like the proof of work, the proof of stake.
Yeah.
So the proof of stake, when you put up that stake, you can also earn interest on it. So like your light nodes, just like an individual sitting on their laptop, they can actually put up the stake and they lock in that for like a 12-month period.
Yeah.
And they earn interest on it, same as like a bank account.
Okay.
Where like your super nodes, they put up the stake more to kind of gain the authority to actually validate the transaction.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And then this is where, so they also spoke about that if you want to become a blockchain miner, so say you've got access to hardware like this, and what you would essentially do is you'd use that hardware to help encrypt and decrypt some of the data that's within the blockchain. Right. And that's what Gevano is talking about with the nodes. So you essentially have these hardware centers that you would do this. But you as an individual, back in the old days, you could pretty much, I don't know if they still allow you to do it as an individual.
Do they? Or do you have to go in a group? Or is there any certifications to become that? Like, maybe Gevano can give us more details on that.
If we're talking like with regards to Bitcoin and processing power specifically,
right?
Industries have become very established within that space. Yeah. So like you see this especially within China or any country where energy is actually quite cheap. They've established like massive data like centers or farms where it's a composition of massive amounts of GPUs.
Yeah.
So if an individual wants to do it themselves, they can, but they're not going to be really competitive because it's like one computer or one little GPU comparing against like
it doesn't even let them qualify to be a little node, a small node.
They can, but it depends on processing power.
Okay.
So you've got multiple nodes working together.
Yeah.
They're going to have the high processing power and they're going to solve the block quicker or validate the transaction quicker.
Okay.
So the light nodes just won't really stand a chance to make money in that regard.
But back in the old days, people would actually use their hardware to do this. I know this because my brother used to do this. But before these bigger corporations caught on to mining, and they would, well, I think at that time it was specifically Bitcoin because the other coins hadn't come around. And what you would do is you'd set up your hardware, you would make sure you don't use it. So you'd get like an old PC, well, not an old PC, but a PC that's capable of actually decrypting and encrypting. And then you'd leave it alone and you would run the software on it to just allow the use of that hardware. And then what would happen is every time that you successfully verify, they would pay you in a cryptocurrency. So they'd pay you in a Bitcoin. And then a lot of people actually made quite a bit of money doing this back in the day. But then obviously larger corporations have now caught on. Yeah, so then they will take.
They wanted that piece
space.
they wanted that piece of the cheese. So yeah. Would you say Gevano, would you say those bigger corporations, like what impact did they do into blockchain from your experience? And if I wanted to be a blockchain miner or a blockchain validator, what do I need to get, or what do I need to do? What certifications do I need to do? What hardware requires me to get into that space?
It's a good question. So I think first and foremost, you need to choose what type of blockchain you want to validate, whether it be Bitcoin, whether it be Ethereum, whether it be Solana. And with regards to that consensus mechanism, so proof of work, proof of stake, you pretty much need to set up your system in that regard. There's no qualifications or certificates that you need to do for that. You just need the hardware for that. As well as like if it's proof of stake, like proof of stake is Ethereum.
Yeah.
Like you need a lot of Ethereums to actually like do the validation.
Right.
And then the validation is once again like it's the backbone of the blockchain that ensures the legitimacy of it. So that is why the validators are there, to ensure that it's legit. It's like the auditors.
Yeah. Of blockchain.
Of the blockchain.
Yeah. So would you say it's loosely? I wouldn't say it's loosely actually regulated with auditors. They're just ensuring that best practice and ensuring that the whole process is smooth as possible,
So
without any internal fraud.
Yeah, it's not loosely. I would say it's actually more secure than current banking.
Yeah, the traditional way.
Yeah.
100%.
Because you've got multiple eyes on the thing throughout the world.
Right.
So you've got multiple computers validating that transaction, and the transaction reflects
Immediately
on multiple computers as well. So even if I manage to hack one of the blocks, there is several other 1,000 blocks reflecting that same
data.
Other data. So then, because I'm not playing by the rules, I would get kicked out. I wouldn't
Very
be able
quickly
to transact on that platform anymore, and it would be spotted relatively quickly.
Brilliant.
Whereas now, if you think about a bank, how many eyes on those types of transactions?
A lot. Let's say I want to go from First National Bank to Standard Bank.
I think it's a lot less.
A lot less, yeah. And then you have to wait for the reflection time. Anything can happen in that period. They can even stop your amount for suspected fraud. And then they can, a lot can happen in that. And then they can eliminate the paper trail and say, we don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much, it's a lot to think about. But this is pretty much covering the beginning stages of our two-part series.
Yeah,
so thank you for joining, and stay tuned for next week when we post our video about cryptocurrency. My name is Kirsten Lake.
My name is Lwazi Shamase, and we're joined by our special guest,
Gevano Dantu.
Thank you. You guys just got Decoded.